Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for March 11th, 2024. I'm going to be reporting today on some signs emerging of sanity in regards to the war in Ukraine, a recognition that the war cannot be won, and that a continuation of the war, including the deploying of long-range missiles into Ukraine, risks the danger of triggering something much bigger, including the possibility of a nuclear exchange. Now, it's interesting, of all places to have this change in thinking coming, we have a statement from Pope Francis in the Vatican and from Simon Jenkins of The Guardian. And both recognize not only the futility of continuing fighting, but the importance to actually move toward a negotiated settlement. Now, this is coming in the wake of the reports of the German Air Force generals discussing the deployment of Taurus missiles to Ukraine and the idea of hitting the Kerch Bridge. This goes against what Chancellor Scholz has said as German policy, but it provoked a warning from a Russian military official who said, if you hit the Kerch Bridge, we'll have to decide which bridges we'll take out in Germany. It also comes in the context of the Foreign Minister Baerbock of the Green Party on a Sunday night talk show supporting the proposal of the British Foreign Minister David Cameron that the Germans could send the Taurus missiles to the UK and the UK would send more Storm Shadow missiles to Ukraine. Now, this is part of the British drive, and the fact that Baerbock bowed down to it just confirms that the green policy is made in London. Now, it also comes as Macron is talking about deploying NATO troops into Ukraine, and the Lithuanians are saying they're willing to deploy troops into Ukraine. So there's an overall drumbeat from the NATO side for an escalation. Now, at the same time, though, there are more and more reports of the hopeless situation in Ukraine. So in that context, listen to the words from the Vatican and from the Guardian. The Pope was asked by an interviewer who said, some call the courage of surrender of the white flag, but others say this would legitimize the stronger party. What do you think? And the Pope said, this is one interpretation, but I believe that the stronger one is the one who sees the situation, who thinks of the people, and who has the courage of the white flag to negotiate. Negotiations are possible with the help of international powers. The word negotiate is a courageous word, he said. When you see that you are defeated, that things are not going well, it is necessary to have the courage to negotiate. You may feel ashamed, but how many deaths will it end? Negotiate in time. And the Pope then suggests Turkey as a possible mediator, but he concludes by saying, do not be ashamed to negotiate before things get worse. Now, similarly, listen to the language of Simon Jenkins in The Guardian. And The Guardian often has been speaking for the war party in the United Kingdom, so this is significant. He said that there was the mooted peace deal in the spring of 2022. He said that actually made sense. Now, he doesn't report that it was Boris Johnson who went over there on behalf of NATO to scuttle it. But Jenkins goes on to say, instead of a peace deal, Ukraine has come to seem ever more like a NATO mercenary for Western generals wanting to boost their budgets and relive the Cold War games of their youth. Jenkins continues, Western Europe has no conceivable interest in escalating the Ukraine war through a long-range missile exchange. It has no strategic interest in Kiev's desire to drive Russia out of the majority Russian-speaking areas of Crimea or Donbass. It has every interest in assiduously seeking an early settlement and starting the rebuilding of Ukraine. And he then goes on to say, Western sanctions, which were supposed to cripple Russia, have had no such effect. They failed. And he concludes by saying, quote, the crass ineptitude of a quarter of a century of Western military interventions should have taught us some lessons. Apparently not, unquote. Now, these are quite strong statements. Now, contrast these with what Biden said in the State of the Union address. And no one knows for sure how many cans of Red Bull were pumped into Biden. And the media, of course, is cheerleading, saying that he was robust, he was tough, he stayed awake for the whole speech, and so on. But what did he say? Well, among other things, he said, quote, "I say this to Congress, we have to stand up to Putin. Send me a bipartisan national security bill. History is literally watching. History is watching. If the United States walks away, it will put Ukraine at risk, Europe at risk, the free world will be at risk, emboldening others to do what they wish to do us harm." Now, then he concluded this section of the speech. And by the way, most of his speech was of this sort, pounding the idea of freedom versus autocracy, of NATO military as the key. And he finished by saying, "My message to President Putin is simple. We will not walk away. We will not bow down. I will not bow down. In a literal sense, history is watching." So who does Biden bow down for? He bows down to the war party. He bows down to the neoliberals, the neo-colonial forces. And it's clear that maybe he's not demented, but minimally he's schizophrenic. On March 9th, in talking about the Gaza situation, he reiterated his call for a ceasefire. Now, the idea of a temporary ceasefire is really a bit of idiocy. In other words, you stop shooting for a little while, then you start shooting again. You continue the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. That seems to be what Biden and his advisors are saying. But he called for a ceasefire coinciding with Ramadan, and he said we should build off of that. Well, there was no such ceasefire. The Israelis are not interested, and at this point, neither is Hamas. So then Biden warned that an Israeli attack on Rafah would kill more civilians. And he said it would, quote, "cross a red line." It is a red line. But then he said, "I'm never going to leave Israel." So he said that they might reduce military aid if Israel crosses the red line. But then he said, there is no red line, quote, "to cut off all weapons," unquote. So is there a red line or not? Does Biden want to preside over a U.S. complicity in genocide or not? And how many deaths are too many? At what point is the red line crossed? Already, close to 2 million people have been driven out of their homes. We've seen over 30,000 dead. Many of them are women and children. So the question posed to Biden is, do you wish to have a peace there, or do you wish to have continued slaughter? So while we see some indication of sanity emerging, we see still the lingering effects of the control of the unipolar order by a military-industrial financial complex. Now let's just go back to Germany for a moment, where Baerbock and Habeck, her Green colleague in the government, are talking about an extended military buildup for the war in Ukraine. Now, this is going on at the point at which there's an accelerated downfall of the German economy. I'll have more on that tomorrow. But the idea that you can rebuild the German economy by going to war is a reflection of the same idea that Hitler was put in to do by the likes of Montague Norman and the Harriman interests in the United States, the Rockefeller interests, who saw a military buildup for Germany as a way that Germany could pay off the World War I debt. So is Germany today on the course, the same course of the Nazis in the 1930s? Well, if you look at these two things, you certainly have to scratch your head and ask, what the hell is wrong with these Greens? Now, the solution and the way to peace is to end neocolonialism, end geopolitics. And this is what the fight has been waged by the Schiller Institute. We will be having on April 13th a conference on the Oasis Plan. There'll be more on that in coming updates. And I'll append again the discussion of what the Oasis Plan is and why it represents the only solution to the crisis in the world today.